flames in St. Louis or Baltimore. This is the same media who denigrated law enforcement officers for years in defense of social justice warriors and false narratives.
When we equip police with all these powers and no training, that doesn't just affect one segment of the community. That impacts everybody.
Let's make that clear. The city's not burning because of these protesters. The city is burning because the police killed Freddie Gray.
I do not trust this. Oh, they're bad, so they must have done something wrong and they deserve what they had coming rationale, which is the same one we hear from the CIA as we hear from police in a case like Michael Brown. Our hearts are out there marching with them.
They never challenged the lie of hands up, don't shoot. And remember, they lapped up the false narrative that the police killed Freddie Gray. It was all a crock. It was all done to cast aspersions on police and empathize with certain minority activists. Law enforcement did not get the benefit of the doubt in those cases, and oftentimes that is the case with them. So no, I'm not dissuaded for a nanosecond by their phony claims of shock and dismay over conservatives who have the temerity to challenge Bob Mueller, Jim Comey, and Andrew McCabe. And let's not forget what the president said last week about the rank and file of that very agency of the FBI.
When you return home to your local precincts, I want you to deliver a message to your fellow officers. The President of the United States has your back 100%.
Yeah, definitely sounds like he and his followers don't support the FBI. Look, the fact is, what the left is really irked about, let's be honest here, is that the president is actually following through on his major promises. And by the way, we saw this today with the announcement of our new American security strategy. Henceforth, we will use a principled realism to deal with our allies and our adversaries. We see China now for what it is. It's a state-run power aggressively seeking global dominance. We'll work with them when they can, but we have our eyes wide open. Same with Russia. Although, let's face it, they have an economy smaller than France's. It's not quite China. Our approach to the world now will be consistently grounded in our America First ideal. It's a total, complete repudiation of Obama's citizen of the world claptrap that we heard about so often for his 8 years. So no wonder the left is totally unhinged. Soaring economy, tax reform about to pass, confidence high, ISIS smashed, deportations up, foreign policy refocused. And no, we are not tired of winning, but as we do so, we will continue to ask uncomfortable questions at times about Bob Mueller's team or any other part of the government where corruption might lie. It's our job, and that's the angle. And now for a deeper look into what's really going on in the Mueller investigation, the Wall Street Journal's Kim Strassel joins us from Alaska. Wow, Kim, good for you. And here in the studio, former FBI Assistant Director Ron Hosko. Ron, let's start with you. What did I get right? What did I get wrong?
Well, I think that you got a lot right. On many levels, the president is succeeding, and I certainly believe that that the media is right to shed a light and raise questions that I think are legitimate questions about whether Bob Mueller is running an unbiased, fair, responsible investigation. Those are fair questions to ask, given the background of some of the attorneys that have staffed that group.
And he makes a distinction, Ron, between the rank-and-file officers of the FBI. You can see his love for the law enforcement, whether it's police, first responders, firefighters, or the FBI. And the leadership, which at times, I think in this case, has made judgments in hiring that have been ill-advised, at the very least.
Well, look, Bob Mueller has the right to hire the team of his choosing. However, raising questions and looking at the composition of that team, I think, is entirely legitimate, because at the end of the day, what you want is an unbiased investigation. The light is going to shine in. We are going to have an understanding, and what has happened, what we saw on text exchanges between a lead FBI investigator and an FBI attorney,
Peter Strzok and Lisa Page.
Right. Those raise legitimate questions. They certainly are embarrassing to the workforce over there. And look, the FBI knows, the rank and file know, and the senior leadership knows that your personal biases can never infect your work. We all have certain biases. We all have proclivities, but you can't let it infect the world.
Kim, let's go to you. You've been reporting extensively on this. The apoplectic response by the left for these legitimate questions, as Ron referenced, as a former FBI man himself, assistant director, they're over the top. And this from Democrats who have routinely questioned law enforcement across the country in the most vicious ways, frankly, oftentimes unfounded.
Look, I think the depth and the range of that complaint about him and the attacks on him are a signal of Democratic realization of how big a problem Bob Mueller has created for himself. Because let's be clear, Bob Mueller has done this to himself. Nobody else. It's not the conservative media. I think a lot of us out there, and myself included, when he was first appointed, we were hopeful. We wanted to know. I still want to know. Is there anything improper or illegal about Trump transition team or campaign team ties to the Russians? But I think a lot of people also expected that he was going to look into what really happened last year, what happened within the FBI. And we're coming to the realization that not only is the team that is working for him incapable of looking into those issues because they're the people who stand accused, as it were, but they may have biases that prohibit them from fairly looking at the Trump team and what happened. And he's done this to himself by choosing them and then by not coming clean when he found out himself what was going on.
I think the Wall Street Journal writer who I think originally wrote about this today, Kim, said, well, no, when they talked about an insurance policy, they were essentially trying to help Trump. Did you see that reference today on Twitter? There was like a 14-tweet long chain, which Brit Hume and I were howling about on Twitter. We're like, oh, okay, so he was actually trying to help Trump with this insurance policy. I couldn't follow that, I have to confess.
Well, there's a lot of theories getting thrown out there right now about how you could possibly explain this because it looks very, very bad. But here's the reality, Laura. We're not going to know until the FBI actually puts this guy forward to be interviewed by Congress. And again, I think this gets to the problem that Mueller has. They wanted to interview him months ago, and the FBI has continued to refuse to make him available. They kept those texts hidden, and so did the Mueller team. That does not inspire confidence by anyone. If Bob Mueller had cared about the credibility of what he was doing when he demoted this guy back in July, he'd have gone to Congress, who clearly has an interest in this, told him what was going on, and said, look, I dealt with the problem. That's not what happened.
Ron, this is what Andy McCarthy said today on my radio show. He was talking about the initial decision to recuse himself by Jeff Sessions. Mm-hmm. Let's listen.
I give him a 1 on how he's performed in connection with the Russia stuff. His recusal on Russia was way too broad, including giving Mueller a warrant to investigate this thing that has absolutely no limits and that has become just the fishing expedition that people like me complained it was going to be.
So he gave Sessions a 1 out of 10, and the handling of this thing and most everything else, he's been fantastic. Right. But this was a mistake from the beginning. No evidence of a crime, yet a limitless supply of lawyers, money, and time.
Yeah, there's a couple things that give me faith in Bob Mueller and in the outcome of this investigation. Like Kimberly, I want to know, too. One, I worked for Bob Mueller. I think he's a person of high integrity. He's a patriot. Two, the sun will shine in on this investigation. The results will tell us what did he find. It could well be, and we haven't seen him get close to the president yet, could well be that he finds nothing, that he's found some other lower-level criminality by Mike Flynn, who's pled guilty, by Paul Manafort, who's been charged, and a couple of others. But because this is going to play out in the U.S. courts, we're going to get to see what the evidence is. We're going to get to see the strength of the evidence.
It's not going to play out in the U.S. courts regarding the president. That's not how it works. It's going to be impeached or not. It's not going to play out in the U.S. courts.
I'm talking about these collateral players.
Well, by Manafort, but that's not close to what the president was about. The Manafort stuff, I don't see how that has any relevance. So, Kim, the Manafort trial that will come up this year, perhaps, I mean, I'm not seeing any evidence so far that that's connected to anything really close to the president at all.
No, I mean, this is part of the disillusionment, I think, with the Mueller probe, is people were hoping that he was going to go in and we'd somehow get the story of what happened in 2016. People are now being reminded that's never what happens when you have a special prosecutor. We've got these lower level crimes. They somehow cast suspicion on the Trump team, but they don't tell us anything because they're not crimes that are in any way related to what the original charges were: obstruction, collusion, etc. And, you know, I'd have been much happier if Bob Mueller, in the way of finding these things along the way, referred them back to the Justice Department to handle and simply have decided, is there collusion? Is there obstruction? If not, close up shop and then let
collusion's not a crime. As Andy McCarthy keeps saying, and as Andy McCarthy keeps saying, collusion, there is not a crime in actually speaking to Russian officials during an election cycle. That's like another thing that people keep repeating. That's not in the Federal Register as a crime. So the underpinning of this investigation from the beginning, from Sessions recusing himself, which I think was a huge mistake, to the naming of Rod Rosenstein as Deputy Attorney General, to Rod Rosenstein calling a special counsel, those are cataclysmic decisions. And I think those are going to go down as not smart decisions in the end. But great to see both of you. Thank you so much. And by the way, guys, a famed feminist attorney is accused of offering women payments who made accusations against Donald Trump. She's going after that reporter who broke the story. He's going to defend himself up next. Attorney Lisa Bloom is now under fire after reportedly offering money to women willing to accuse the president of prior harassment. At the very least, Bloom engaged in a perverse kind of financial incentive to attract accusers, truth being a perhaps secondary consideration. Now Bloom is going on the attack, smearing the reporter who broke the story, John Solomon of The Hill, calling him a far-right journalist. In reality, John has broken many important stories this year. He joins us now with his side of the story. John, you far-right journalist.
How about that?
For the AP.
That's right.
Stories about rape in the Congo all those years ago. I mean, you won awards and so forth. But by the way, in law school, I had a license plate on my Honda Civic that said far-right. So does that, on my part?
You clearly are, yeah.
Far right on it. Everyone thought it was very funny. So she's on the attack, saying that you're distorting what really happened. It's not fair. What's your reaction?
I learned a long time ago. I've been an investigative reporter for 30 years. If you can't attack the facts, you try to do an ad hominem attack on the reporter. The facts are unassailable. And it is true that though she says she represented women pro bono, she had a nice way of collecting a 33% commission by selling their stories to the tabloids. It's unassailable that she arranged for donors, possibly related to the election, to pay these women money. And I think the women, at least one of the women, described a lot of pressure she felt as the election day got nearer for her to try to come out and make these allegations against Trump. Those are things that are not in dispute.
This is what Lisa Bloom told Joy Reid over the weekend. Let's watch.
Donors reached out to us and said, my God, what can we do to help her or other women come forward? They're in fear. We have this very unequal playing field here. And we discussed arranging for security and relocation services for any women who wanted it. I want to be very clear. Neither Hillary Clinton nor anyone from her campaign was associated with any of those offers for relocation and security.
John, no one from the campaign, Hillary, didn't know anything about it. What little factoids should she leave out in that?
Well, one of them is she will not answer whether she talked to the Clinton super PACs, which is where the real big money is in the election, right? The candidates are capped at $2,400. Super PACs can take a lot more money. She will not answer the question. I've asked it 100 times. Can't get an answer out of her.
She also didn't talk about that little mortgage payment for that house in Queens
let's
that
go
Ms.
through some
Harth
of the things.
hated.
Yeah, one of the women got offered $750,000. You could buy the Secret Service detail for that. You don't need that much protection. And there was other things going on. The woman said one of them wanted their mortgage to get paid. The other woman said, I want my college tuition for my kids paid. It was a lot more than security.
I want to read an email, a story that you broke tonight on The Hill from Jill Harth, the New York makeup artist who accused President Trump in a suit she ultimately dropped in 1997, alleging some type of misconduct. This is what she wrote. She wrote to Trump's assistant, Rona Graff. I also want to put it out there that I would be willing to say at a rally or somewhere how Trump helped me with my self-confidence and all positive things about he is with women to counter any potential negativity that may come out at some point in the campaign. Now, this is from a woman who supposedly was going to come out, and it came out and said, well, he mistreated me,
in between her two,
wrote me or something like that. That she.
In between her two accusations, there's a much greater context to this email. She wanted a job with the Trump campaign. She asked to be his campaign makeup artist.
Whoa. Someone gropes you. You actually file a suit that you ultimately drop, but you obviously can't like him. Allegedly did this. Then she wants to work in the campaign as a makeup artist?
More than that, she wanted him to be the pitch man for her new cosmetic products.
Oh, anything else?
No, that's it. Those are the two things that
what was it? What was it? Mascara?
It was called.
What was Donald Trump going to have, like mascara on? What was he possibly going to put on?
Yeah, it was a whole male beauty product line.
Wait, so she wanted him to do infomercials for her,
well, some sort of pitchman work. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But she came out and said tonight that. I had gotten over the prior, but she was mad that Donald Trump said it didn't happen.
That's right. So she.
This is ridiculous.
If you follow her story, she was angry at him, then not angry at him.
Do my makeup line. I don't like you.
Yeah. Work on a business deal, and they got angry at him again when he denied the allegations.
Now, Lisa Bloom said that none of this changes the fact that she did not tell women to make up stories.
That's right.
And that you wrote that in your original piece.
Yeah, none of the women said they were asked to say anything. No. Now, there was one episode that is kind of interesting. One woman was asked to take all of her pro-Trump comments down from Facebook so that her story would be more believable. So that did happen.
Oh, okay. But they weren't told, you say this and I'll give you extra money.
No, not at all. No.
Well, it's so good to talk to a far-right journalist tonight, and all of your credentials over there.
It's a weird feeling sound to me.
Yeah.
All right.
John, it's always great to see you. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
And joining us now to analyze all of this is civil rights attorney Harmeet Dillon from San Francisco, along with Juan Williams, the co-host of The Five. All right, Juan, hit me with your, I shouldn't say hit me because that'll come out the wrong way, but you know what I'm saying. I can't say anything anymore without offending someone.
I would agree. But no, I thought you actually hit the right point, which is, from the perspective of the women, there's no indication here, despite what Lisa Bloom may have been up to, that they were, in fact, fabricating accounts. Their integrity is not in question here. What's in question is whether or not Lisa Bloom, as a lawyer, was really overstepping bounds in terms of either doing business with donors or potentially willing to take money from tabloids in exchange for the stories coming from the women. But in terms of the charges the women were levying against Donald Trump, there's no indication here that they were making things up, Laura.
Harmeet, your reaction to this? I mean, we're $750,000 offered. They were in touch with donors to Hillary Clinton, who, after that canceled press conference, and before they were being offered money as well, right before the election. Your reaction to this?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the real world, I think what Juan said was nice in fantasy land, but in the real world, people actually do change their stories in exchange for $750,000 or their mortgage paid off or their kids' college paid for. You know, what disgusts me as a plaintiff's lawyer is that people do have real things that happen to them. And when this type of situation happens with an unethical, unscrupulous, and frankly, law-breaking lawyer like Lisa Bloom, what you have is a situation where people then begin to doubt the stories of legitimate victims of sexual harassment and other discrimination. And that kind of disgusts me. And, you know, it's by the way, has anyone asked the question that Lisa Bloom says, oh, well, donors were calling me and approaching me. I mean, how does that work? How does that work? How do the donors know to call Lisa Bloom or Gloria Allred, her mother, any of these types of far-left feminist lawyers, self-proclaimed feminist lawyers, unless it's put out there by somebody that these women are willing to source victims to come forward and tell their story? And I have to credit Lisa Bloom for her creativity here. Getting some donor to make a illegal campaign contribution, really a donation in kind to the Hillary Clinton campaign, and then herself personally profiting from that. I mean, that's a coup if she pulled it off.
Yeah, that's a pretty good system. I want to go back to John.
If you can get it. I mean,
I want to go back to John Solomon for a moment. John, any progress on the reporting on the donors, who they were, how much they were offering? It sounds like something Steyer would be up to, if you ask me.
We're calling lots of people and just doing the old-fashioned gumshoe work, trying to find those donors and what motivated them to make that check. Because the motivation can fall under federal election law if, in fact, they were trying to influence the election with this money.
Yeah, Juan, the question of whether there are campaign finance reform violations, campaign finance law violations, is an interesting one, because if your goal is to influence the outcome of an election, as John wrote tonight in his original article, It seems like that was the goal, because she was flying all over the country trying to get this woman to show up at this press conference and said it's really important that you tell your story. And obviously it didn't happen with that last woman. But that seems like it's certainly an effort to influence the outcome of an election. If you're offering money, as Harmeet said, that's an in-kind donation to a campaign effort. You could, without a doubt, be at least raising questions about campaign finance here. If you're talking about $750,000.
Well, you could raise questions, but I still don't see that there was a crime. I don't approve of Lisa Bloom's behavior, because it looks to me, as was pointed out, that it then opens questions about the credibility of the women's testimony. But as John said, there's no indication that the woman made anything up. Harmeet says, I'm in a fantasy land because I think that with all that money on the table, people wouldn't make things up. Well, where's the evidence that anything was fabricated,
Juan, you don't
that
think
everything
it's
was
odd?
made up?
Juan,
but let me speak to your point, Laura. Your point was interesting to me, but I still don't see a crime, because remember, back then in the heat of that campaign, everybody knew about women coming out, and if these donors wanted to protect the women, I don't see that that's illegal or an in-kind contribution.
Well, paying someone's mortgage off, paying a kid's tuition,
I don't know what the negotiation. You know, this is tawdry.
How is that protecting? How's that protecting? I mean, who doesn't want their mortgage paid off? That's like that's a convenient deal. But
I think Lisa Bloom is the one who's conducting these awful negotiations, but that's not about the women, is it?
Now, my question to you, Juan, though, you said it doesn't call into question the veracity of any of the allegations. I actually take issue with that. I think the Harth gal, can you say gal? You probably can't say that either. But Jill Harth, a makeup artist.
Yeah.
If someone had done what she claims that Donald Trump did, the grope, why would you want to rush to the campaign? There's no other work she can get. There's nothing else she can do in New York City. No stage work she could do. There's no commercial work she could do. She rushes to the Trump campaign. Let me work for you. I'll be a surrogate. I'll say good things about you. So I would put her on the stand and say, wait a second. You made allegations against him in 1997. Now you say he's good for women? When are we supposed to believe you? In 1997? Or do we believe you now, Jill? I mean, it would take about 5 questions for me to destroy her credibility on this. I'm sorry. You guys are being way too charitable.
But that's not all the women. That's one woman.
Well, that's the one I'm focusing on right now.
But that's not the majority. That's not,
I'm using my best example, Juan, right now. Harmeet, you can close it out. Harmeet, go ahead.
Yeah, so Laura, when people come to you as a plaintiff's lawyer about their story, these are vulnerable people, and I think that Lisa Bloom has really exploited some of these women. And so, she goes to fly and talk to somebody in their hospital, and then after the person doesn't comply, she does this emotional manipulation thing, saying, I've been very good to you, you've been very bad to me, etc. And she repeatedly stresses how close it is to the election. So if anybody thinks that the timing of all of this and the escalating money wasn't related to the election, well, I have a bridge to sell you.
Oh, guys, great conversation. And John Solomon, phenomenal report tonight. Really interesting. And by the way, guys, the Boston Globe that famously exposed the sex abuse in the Catholic Church as a serious public matter, but sex abuse within its own walls of the Boston Globe, that's a different matter, very private. We're going to blow the lid off that in just a moment. Talk about a double standard. Get this. The Boston Globe won plaudits and a Pulitzer for its reporting on sexual abuse in the Catholic Church all those years ago. And now the Globe is accused of its own scandal, covering up the names of its employees charged with sexual misconduct. The Globe says the misconduct of its own employees is a confidential personnel matter. This from the paper that argued the public interest outweighed the privacy of priests in seeking to unseal evidence. Hypocrisy? Well, you'll decide. Joining us now with a reaction from New York is Catholic League President Bill Donahue, along with Kathy Aru, publisher of Catalina magazine. Great to see both of you. Thanks for joining us. Bill, I know you had a little surgery today, so thanks for toughing it out with us. I love it. You can't keep a good Irishman down. Look, you come with battle scars. All right, Bill, Boston Globe says this is a different situation. This was not a case of this individual employee committing any acts of physical violence toward anyone, and they cite that as one of the reasons for the confidentiality.
Right. They need to read Massachusetts law. Massachusetts law defines sexual harassment as verbal as well as physical conduct. And beyond that, there are many, many priests who were charged with rather venial type of offenses, and that didn't matter at all to the Boston Globe. In fact, even today, there's one of the reporters is writing how we should make a distinction between somebody who grabs somebody and rape. I've made that distinction now for about 15 years. Nobody at the Boston Globe is willing to listen. These people are phonies. They're rank hypocrites. And all of a sudden, they've discovered privacy rights and confidentiality. One standard for the Globe and one standard for the Catholic Church.
Kathy?
Well, yeah, but I mean, two wrongs don't make a right. The church needs to take care of its problems, and the Boston Globe needs to take care of its problems. And sexual abuse and harassment is not okay anywhere. So the Boston Globe doesn't need to reveal who its accused, alleged harassers are, as much as the church doesn't need to do that. The law will do that, and if these people are guilty, they will be punished. And that's what we saw with the priest that committed the crimes, and that's what we'll see at the Boston Globe. So I don't see a double standard at all.
Kathy, this employee apparently, I mean, this young woman in her 20s said, right, and she filed this complaint back in March, said that he propositioned her to have sexual relations with his wife, but using vulgar sexual language, according to the employee who filed the complaint. Other sexual harassment allegations have since surfaced. The reporter resigned.
Okay.
They declined to identify the employee because his alleged conduct did not involve physical contact, threats, or persistent harassment. Well, I mean, how do you describe persistent? I mean, was this one allegation? Was it many allegations? It seems like there were other allegations that have surfaced since that original allegation. So there's persistent conduct, maybe not with that one employee, but there could be a pattern or practice of this type of conduct in the newsroom. But it seems like it's a question of whose ox is gored here. They now want the confidentiality, and they championed this idea of full transparency back in 2003 or 2002.
Right. Well, back then they did it because there was a definite problem going on with the Catholic Church, and they were revealing the problem as a media source should do, as the media should do. That's what the media does. They're the watchdog of the United States.
Yeah, but they're not going to be a watchdog of themselves. World. They don't want to reveal the name of this individual.
But this is an alleged case. It's alleged. We don't know, and they're not going to destroy a person's reputation and life based on an accusation. The law.
Okay, so you think all the men who are accused of sexual harassment in all these cases, their names shouldn't be used?
The law doesn't require that their names be used. No, you don't ruin a person's reputation. It's America. You're innocent until proven guilty.
It's not a court of law. It's not a court. This is
Laura, let me give you an example of just how phony these people are. Not just at the Boston Globe. A number of years ago, a reporter from CNN came to my office and insisted that the Catholic Church post the names of all the accused. Not anybody who's found credibly or substantiated accusation. Anybody who's been accused, they should put that up on the website of the Archdiocese. I had the phone in my hand. I picked it up and I said, Miss, can I have the name of your boss and his phone number? She said, why? I said, I'm going to report you as sexually abusing me. And then I'm going to ask whether or not they're going to put your name up on the website of CNN. She said, I got your point. And I put the phone down. It grates me so much that if you want to go back to the 1920s, that's what the Boston Globe says. We go back to the 1920s about accused priests. Well, the Boston Globe goes back to the 1870s. Certainly we can go back to World War I. And I guarantee you the Catholic League will pay for an army of lawyers to look at the Boston Globe to see if there's any more of this kind of stuff going on. Because I don't believe them that they rolled out a couple of cases from the 1970s. They roll out a case from today, and we're expected to believe that that's it. And they don't pay any price for this, and the law enforcement are not engaged. I've never seen such phoniness in my life outside of Hollywood, perhaps.
Oh, Kathy, they say they've hired a lot more women. They have a lot more women managers, and that's
I'm sure it can be proven. I'm sure it can be proven. But it's the media's job to push the envelope, and it sounds like that's what they were doing with the Catholic Church. The media has to ask the tough questions.
But they got to ask the tough questions of themselves. You're making my point. Yeah, fine. I'm glad they exposed what they did. I'm glad they did what they did. But the question is,
but this is just divisive.
You let the light shine in at home too. Let the light shine in at home.
The Boston Globe should take care of their problems. The Catholic Church should take care of their problems. I mean, there shouldn't.
None of they get their problems if they're not going to investigate.
They get to have the anonymity. Yeah,
they'll be investigated. If it's
they're not going to investigate them.
Investigate themselves. Yeah. Well, we'll see. I bet we'll find out other cases of individuals that are accused.
I'm sure you
will. All right, guys, we're out of time. I'm sorry we could continue this all night. Speaking of travesties, by the way, how does the busiest airport in the world just go dark for half a day. And how in the world does a train on a brand new route, inaugural trip, just jump the rails and land on one of the busiest interstates in the United States? Plus, I've got a word or two for Mark Hamill, and maybe you'll hear. It's been a horrible 24 hours in transportation. 2 failures, one embarrassing and one tragic. The first at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, the busiest in the world, which was completely shut down for 11 hours by a power outage. And then this morning, tragedy struck as a Washington State Amtrak train derailed, plunging off a bridge onto Interstate 5, killing at least 3 people, injuring more than 100. Investigators are still looking for the exact cause, with attention on the train's high rate of speed. As a candidate, and today, President Trump warned about the country's infrastructure and that it was crumbling.
It's one thing to have $20 trillion in debt, and our roads are good, and our bridges are good, and everything's in great shape. Our airports are like from a third world country. Let me begin by expressing our deepest sympathies and most heartfelt prayers for the victims of the train derailment in Washington State. It is all the more reason why we must start immediately fixing the infrastructure of the United States.
Joining us now with a reaction from Lubbock, Texas, is Oliver McGee, a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Transportation. It's great to see you, sir. The president commented about infrastructure regarding the Amtrak derailment. However, that was an inaugural route of for that train, was it not? And it might not be an infrastructure issue on that particular accident.
Well, thank you for having me, Laura. It probably is, because this was about positive train control, and usually that new technology takes a few months to get in a new inaugural ride for a new high-speed rail system. It's really designed, Laura, to look ahead in the communication channels to give communication back to the cockpit of what's in the railway road. And this train accidents, if we do technical speculation, is indicating that possibly the train ran into something, and that's what caused the tumbling cars. But also there was speed involved, so we have a lot of momentum involved in here, which tossed the cars off the embankment. And then most importantly, this was going into a historic bridge, and it had very little embankment control for having the cars to tumble
there's
off
the infrastructure. Trump is right again. Okay,
yes,
if that's the case.
Yes,
and you can question
right
Trump,
again.
and maybe he's right again, Oliver. So, Oliver, you have the embankment issue with the bridge. You have the speed control technology that could have been in the train. We were talking on my radio show today with my producers, and we said, how can there not be, with all of our technology, something in that train that would prevent it from going at a certain speed at a certain point? I mean, we can hit Yankee, home plate at Yankee Stadium from outer space, but we can't slow a train down remotely? That seems crazy. And why would you let the train go if you had that technology? To me, that makes no sense. But what do I know? I'm not an expert on trains. You're the transportation guy.
Well, really, this is going to be about transportation infrastructure bill of President Trump, and he's going to be really looking at transportation science and technology, and it's about the 7 grand challenges that Infotech, which is going to be the information communication systems that are in the trains. It's going to be wireless tech, because we have to have wireless communications, and I was saying to Harris Faulkner this morning on Outnumbered that we probably need to look at the black box in the cloud, looking at trains, planes, and automobiles.
Bingo.
And find out where they are across the nation.
Oliver, before we let you go, I got to get your thought very quickly on Atlanta Hartsfield, because that was a travesty. Yes. The fact that people could be hovering over their cell phone lights trying to figure out, oh my gosh, how am I going to get home to Grandma for Christmas? In the busiest time of year, among the busiest times of year, for hours and hours and hours. I mean, talk about a vulnerable infrastructure if that could be the case. Real quick.
Absolutely. I was talking to my very good friend Leslie today, and she was saying that she had a friend that was stuck in the airport for hours and watching people being taken out in wheelchairs because they were going through dark tunnels. And then, can you imagine being caught in the sky for 15 hours with then running out of water? Good thing the kids were behaving on the airplane. What we learned today is that we need to start retrofitting the nation's airports, and we also have to have backup systems on here because the air traffic control went down. We need to back up airports like we back up hospitals. Can you imagine a hospital having a blackout and people are sick inside of a hospital? We can't have a sick airport. We can't have a sick security
all of
and
this,
President
Trump talked about this on the campaign trail, and he made this a priority, and he was right. Guys, we have to take a break. Mark Hamill, a.k.a. Luke Skywalker, going very political with his...
Welcome back to Hannity. Earlier today, President Trump laid out his national security strategy, where he promoted American strength. Take a look.
We're here today to discuss matters of vital importance to us all: America's security, prosperity, and standing in the world. With every decision and every action, we are now putting America first. To counter Iran and block its path to a nuclear weapon, I sanctioned the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps for its support of terrorism, and I declined to certify the Iran deal to Congress. We have dealt ISIS one devastating defeat after another. The coalition to defeat ISIS has now recaptured almost 100% of the land once held by these terrorists in Iraq and in Syria. Our campaign of maximum pressure on the North Korean regime has resulted in the toughest ever sanctions. We have united our allies in an unprecedented effort to isolate North Korea. For the first time ever, American strategy now includes a serious plan to defend our homeland. It calls for the construction of a wall on our southern border, ending chain migration and the horrible visa and lottery programs. In addition, our strategy calls for us to confront, discredit, and defeat radical Islamic terrorism and ideology, and to prevent it from spreading into the United States. America will lead again. We do not seek to impose our way of life on anyone, but we will champion the values without apology.
Joining us now with reaction, Deputy Assistant to the President for Strategic Communications on the National Security Council, Michael Anton. Good evening, Michael. The president's speech was very consistent with everything that he's been saying since the campaign, except now it appears that he's at a point where he can talk about improved economic situation in this country with the stock market as well as the defeat of ISIS. It's almost as though it's a one-year report card where he succeeded.
Certainly, the speech was in part a one-year report card. It's also a speech to roll out, introduce to the American people the strategy document. But that strategy document is informed, first and foremost, we began with his campaign speeches. We continued with his major foreign policy addresses of 2017, and of course, all of his actions in 2017 to change the course of American foreign policy. So he wanted to both talk to the American people about the new strategy, or at least the new strategy document, because as I say, it's a strategy that's already been in operation for this year, and to give a report card to say to them, this is what I've been doing, this is what we've accomplished, this is the path that we're taking going forward.
And, you know, when the president talked about defeating ISIS and recapturing almost 100% of the territory that they had conquered, I mean, you would think that he would be getting some credit for that. Especially given the fact that President Obama was like, you know, it's going to be a long long time. It's going to take years. I mean, this president comes in, it's like bing, bang, boom, they're gone.
He's getting some credit for it, but I agree with you, not nearly enough. And a lot of the reason why that campaign accelerated so quickly this year was a fundamental change in strategy, including loosening of various rules that had micromanaging decisions being made here at the White House, as opposed to devolve down to commanders in the field to make the decisions that they best saw fit. So we've seen a really rapid degradation of ISIS capabilities in the Middle East and almost the destruction of the physical caliphate. You notice he said nearly 100%. I said almost. Mm-hmm. We don't want to say we're all the way there yet, but certainly we're miles ahead of where we were when this administration came into office. And that's very important because while it'll be difficult to fully eradicate ISIS as a group, when they don't control territory, population centers, and resources, their ability to project power and threaten us at home or at our installations overseas is reduced dramatically.
All right. Michael Anton, thanks so much for being with us. And joining us now with more reaction to President Trump's national security strategy is Fox News contributor and former U.S. ambassador to the UN, John Bolton. All right. Good evening, Ambassador. I want to talk about the latest story that it appears that the Obama administration, in their effort to get this Iran deal passed, basically passed on Hezbollah and let them off the hook. And but they deliberately overlooked the drug trafficking and the smuggling operations, weapons trafficking, and it was across the board. Treasury Department, Justice Department, along with State Department. Whoa. Can you think of a good reason for that?
Well, I think in Obama's mind, his administration would have done anything to secure the nuclear deal with Iran and would have taken no steps that in any way jeopardized that deal. And this treatment of Hezbollah, the things that were laid out in the article that Politico published about that you've just mentioned,
unbelievable. Yeah,
I think are perfectly believable when you look at what Obama was up to. Look, Hezbollah has been an Iranian-directed terrorist group, even in its constituent parts before Hezbollah itself came together. The bombing of the Marine barracks in Lebanon, 1983, was an Iran-directed operation.
Right.
This is the A-team of international terrorism, and Obama appeased it because he didn't want to do anything that might offend the Ayatollahs in Tehran. And this is just a piece of the record. There is so much that Obama gave away to get that deal that when the full record is laid out, Americans will be appalled.
You know, Politico that did the story, and there's a headline, the secret backstory of how Obama let Hezbollah off the hook. In its determination to secure a nuclear deal, the Obama administration basically looked the other way. It had to have been clearly demoralizing, Ambassador, for people in the DEA. I mean, they put their lives at stake. They've got undercovers. They've got all kinds of information and assets out there that they are trying to protect. And the Obama administration is delaying or rejecting their efforts. And the worst part of it is that, 60,000 Americans die every year of drug overdoses. And, while these people are bringing in cocaine into the United States, the president of the United States is saying, oh, you just ignore it, let it pass.
Yeah, as I say, whatever made the Iranian regime happy, Barack Obama was prepared to do. So this is, as you're pointing out very graphically, sacrificing key American interests in order to make the Iranians happier to come to this deal. There wasn't anything Obama wasn't prepared to give away, and he came very close to giving away the entire story. This deal was made in heaven for the Iranians. Obama was happy to solve it because fundamentally he didn't think that they were the problem. He thought once he could show that America didn't have a hostile intent, that the Ayatollahs would join the civilized world and everything would be happy. Since they signed the deal in the summer of 2015, that has not happened. His premises were wrong. His negotiation was bad. This deal is terrible, and I hope the next demonstration of the America First strategy we see is the president rejecting the deal in its entirety.
Well, and that certainly is a possibility. But, you know, it really is amazing, Ambassador, that Obama, President Obama, just laid back when it came to everything. I mean, I will never forget the prayer breakfast, that first national prayer breakfast, and I don't recall who had just had their head cut off. And, you know, the president comes out and says, well, you know, you Christians, it's, you know, get off your high horses, really your turn. I mean, he laid back for everybody. But, you know, there've got to be Americans out there whose kids died at about that time from overdoses, who have to be infuriated. And, you know, we talk about blood on the president's hands. I mean, this is a lot. The nexus is a lot clearer here. But I want to talk about someone else now. And I'm going to ask that they put the sound on Clapper in his criticism of President Trump goes so far as to try to show how Vladimir Putin is using the president as an asset. Take a listen.
I think this past weekend is illustrative of what a great case officer Vladimir Putin is. He knows how to handle an asset, and that's what he's doing with the president.
You're saying that Russia is handling President Trump as an asset?
That seems to be that's the appearance to me.
You know what's so amazing? I mean, the backstory here is that the CIA was in a position to give intel to Russia and to whether Putin or his people regarding an attack on a Christian church or a Greek Orthodox church, Russian Orthodox, in Russia, in St. Petersburg, I believe. And he calls and says, thank you. And this guy Clapper criticizes the president. Now, here's my take on this. Do you remember when the Russians told the FBI about the Tsarnaev brothers and the Boston bombing? They said it once, and the FBI didn't listen. And then they called them again, and the FBI said, well, they didn't give us specific information. And you got to give the Russians credit. They listened to the CIA, and they stopped the attack on the church.
Yeah, look,
what's your take?
I think this communication about the Tsarnaev brothers, we still don't know the full story of why the FBI didn't take it seriously. And I hope that's something the Justice Department is looking into. But to come back to General Clapper, I'm not holding my breath, but to come back to General Clapper, he just accused the president of treason, essentially. He's saying that he's a witting Russian agent. And, you know, if he's got evidence for that, I'd like to hear it. This paranoia really is causing enormous negative consequences for our democratic institutions. And to go back to your earlier discussion about the independent counsel, unless there's evidence of collusion, of which we have seen none so far, I really think there's got to be a way to draw this investigation